On March 8, 2014, a Boeing 777 carrying 239 people lifted off into the night sky and was never seen again. No distress call, no wreckage, no answers. Just silence. In a world where satellites track every move, where phones connect us instantly across oceans, how can a massive passenger jet simply vanish? For nearly a decade, families have waited, investigators have searched, and theories have spread. But the truth of Flight MH370 remains one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. Tonight, we revisit the story that still haunts the world. It began like any other flight. On the night of March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 prepared for its journey from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. The Boeing 777 carried 239 people, passengers, crew, families, and business travelers. The mood on board was ordinary children. Settled into seats, business travelers opened laptops, and parents whispered goodnight to their kids. At 12:41 a.m., the aircraft lifted off into the night sky. Weather was clear. Systems were normal. The captain, Zahari Ahmad Shah, and his first officer, Farik Abdul Hamed, exchanged routine messages with air traffic control. Nothing seemed unusual. As the plane climbed to cruising altitude, the last words spoken from the cockpit were calm and unremarkable. A voice believed to be the co-pilot simply said, "Good night, Malaysian 370. Moments later, the plane crossed into Vietnamese airspace and then vanished. Radars lost track. Transponders went dark. No distress call was ever made. Families waiting at Beijing airport would never see their loved ones arrive. The world had no idea it was witnessing the beginning of one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. Within minutes of losing contact, confusion set in. Air traffic controllers tried repeatedly to reach Flight MH370. Calls went unanswered. Radar screens showed nothing. At first, officials assumed it was a simple communication failure. But as the minutes dragged on, silence turned into alarm. By dawn, families in Beijing were told the flight was delayed. Some still expected to see loved ones walk through the arrival gate. Others felt a growing sense of dread. In Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia Airlines gathered relatives into hotel conference rooms, promising updates. But there were no answers, only questions. The initial theory was straightforward. The plane had crashed into the South China Sea. Search and rescue teams mobilized quickly, sweeping the waters where MH370 should have been. Helicopters, naval ships, and aircraft joined the hunt. But as days passed, not a single piece of wreckage was found. The world watched in shock. How could a modern aircraft, equipped with advanced communication and navigation systems, simply disappear? Even the most remote oceans, satellites orbit. Overhead, radar tracks flight paths, and emergency beacons send signals. Yet here was a passenger jet vanishing as if it had never existed. This wasn't just an aviation incident anymore. It was the beginning of a global mystery. In the absence of evidence, speculation filled the void. In those early days, theories spread faster than facts. Some experts believed the plane suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure, perhaps an engine explosion or sudden decompression. But if that were true, why hadn't the pilot sent a mayday call? Others pointed to the possibility of terrorism. After all, Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 had been shot down later that same year over Ukraine. Could MH370 have been another victim of an attack? Investigators quickly checked passenger lists. 2 travelers had boarded with stolen passports, raising alarms. But it turned out they were asylum seekers, not terrorists. Conspiracy theories gained traction too. Some claimed the aircraft had been hijacked and diverted to a secret location. Others suspected military involvement. Was it possible the plane had flown into restricted airspace and been intercepted? Still, no theory fit perfectly. The only certainty was uncertainty itself. Families begged for clarity, but officials struggled to provide it. Meanwhile, the search expanded across oceans. Countries from around the world contributed ships, planes, and technology. The South China Sea was scoured. But the more they searched, the more they realized they might be looking in the wrong place. As days turned into weeks, investigators realized something far more complex had happened to flight. MH370 data revealed that the plane hadn't simply crashed after disappearing from civilian radar. Instead, military radar showed the aircraft had taken a sharp left turn, flying back across the Malaysian peninsula. It crossed over the Strait of Malacca, passed near the island of Penang, and then vanished from radar once again. But this time, there was no trace at all. At first, authorities insisted the plane had gone down in the South China Sea. Families clung to that hope, believing search crews were looking in the right place. But behind closed doors, investigators were seeing something different. Inmarsat, a British satellite company, released stunning data. MH370 had continued to communicate with satellites for nearly 7 more hours after its transponder was shut off. These handshakes, as they were called, were automated signals that showed the plane was still flying long after it was thought to have disappeared. This revelation shifted the entire search operation. Instead of the South China Sea, investigators now believed the plane had traveled either north toward Central Asia or south into the vast Indian Ocean. The implications were staggering. How could a modern Boeing 777, tracked by multiple systems, fly thousands of miles undetected? Why hadn't the crew sent a single distress call? Tension grew between governments. Malaysia was accused of withholding information. Families demanded the truth, staging protests outside government offices and airline headquarters. Meanwhile, conspiracy theories began to dominate the headlines. Some believed the plane was hijacked. Others suspected the pilots. A few whispered about secret military operations or hidden agendas. But one thing was certain: the official story kept changing, and trust was quickly eroding. The search now expanded to one of the most remote and dangerous places on Earth, the southern Indian Ocean. Search ships and aircraft were deployed thousands of miles from land. The ocean was deep, stormy, and unforgiving. It was, as one investigator put it, like trying to find a needle in an endless ocean. And yet, despite the vast resources poured into the mission, the Indian Ocean gave up no secrets, no debris, no wreckage, nothing. The disappearance of MH370 was no longer just a tragedy. It was becoming one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in modern history. By now, months had passed. Search ships had scoured tens of thousands of square miles in the southern Indian Ocean. Sonar equipment mapped the ocean floor in detail, searching for any trace of a Boeing 777. But the ocean remained silent. With no wreckage to confirm the truth, the world turned to theories. Some were grounded in evidence, others in speculation. Investigators looked closely at Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, the 53-year-old pilot in command. Some reports claimed he had shown signs of depression. Others pointed to a flight simulator found in his home, with routes similar to the one MH370 may have taken into the Indian Ocean. Could Zahari have deliberately crashed the plane in an act of murder-suicide? Supporters of this theory say the deliberate turns after the transponder shut off could only have been made by an experienced pilot. Critics argue there is no solid proof of his intent, and Zahari's family strongly denies the claim. In the early days, terrorism was the first suspicion. 2 passengers had boarded with stolen passports, sparking global alarm. But they were later identified as Iranian migrants seeking asylum, hardly fitting the profile of terrorists. Still, many believe hijacking remains possible. If so, where were the demands? Why wasn't the plane used in an attack? The silence makes this theory difficult to prove. Could MH370 have suffered a catastrophic technical issue? Perhaps a fire in the cockpit or a sudden loss of oxygen. In this scenario, the crew and passengers may have become incapacitated, leaving the plane to fly on autopilot until fuel ran out. This is known as the ghost flight theory. It explains the long satellite pings, but it struggles to explain the deliberate course changes seen after the transponder was shut off. Another chilling idea is that MH370 may have been accidentally shot down. Some point to past incidents, like Iran Air Flight 655 in 1988, or Korean Air Flight 007 in 1983, both shot down by military forces who mistook them for threats. Was MH370 caught in restricted airspace? Did someone cover up a mistake? Governments have repeatedly denied this, but suspicions linger. Perhaps the most controversial theory suggests MH370 landed somewhere in secrecy. Some believe it could have been taken to a remote base, hidden from the world. But after years of searching, no evidence has ever surfaced to support this. Then, in 2015, hope for answers briefly returned. On Reunion Island, off the coast of Africa, a large piece of aircraft wreckage washed ashore. Investigators confirmed it was part of a Boeing 777 known as a flaperon. It belonged to MH370. In the months that followed, more debris surfaced. Along coastlines in Mozambique, Tanzania, and Madagascar, some items were positively identified as belonging to the missing plane. Others were likely but not confirmed. These discoveries proved one crucial fact. MH370 had ended in the Indian Ocean, yet the debris raised more questions than answers. Why were so few pieces found? Where was the fuselage? And most importantly, where were the passengers? Despite the largest and most expensive search in aviation history, stretching across years and costing hundreds of millions of dollars, the main wreckage and the black boxes were never recovered. For the families, each new discovery brought only heartbreak. Small fragments of wreckage were not enough to explain the fate of 239 lives. And so, the theories continue. Each one offering a possible answer. Each one leaving gaps that may never be filled. For the families of those on board flight MH370, time stood still. In Beijing, relatives crowded into hotels, waiting for updates that never came. In Kuala Lumpur, anxious families filled conference rooms, staring at airline officials who had few answers to give. Some clutched photographs of their loved ones. Others held on to the hope that the passengers were still alive somewhere. Somehow. Every day brought more questions, but never closure. Some families refused to believe the plane had crashed at all. Others begged governments to release the full truth, convinced information was being hidden. The grief was overwhelming. Husbands lost wives. Children lost parents. Entire families vanished that night. For the survivors left behind, life became a never-ending cycle of sorrow, anger, and waiting. In the years that followed, support groups formed. Mothers and fathers traveled across continents, pleading with officials, demanding answers. Some staged protests. Others wrote letters. A few even took matters into their own hands, launching independent investigations. The emotional toll was unbearable. Families reported nightmares, depression, even illnesses brought on by years of unresolved grief. Many said the not knowing was worse than death itself. Without bodies to bury, without wreckage to prove the truth, they felt trapped in limbo. Anniversaries passed. Each year on March 8th, vigils were held. Candles lit the night sky, prayers were spoken, and tears flowed freely. For many, the pain never lessened, it only grew. The children of missing passengers grew older without parents to guide them. Spouses grew old without partners by their side. The families of MH370 were left to carry a wound that never healed. Flight MH370 wasn't just an aviation mystery. It was a personal tragedy that shattered lives. Even today, when the world talks about theories, radar paths, and satellite data, the families are reminded of the simplest truth. 239 people boarded a plane that night, and not a single one came home. As the years passed, Flight MH370 became more than just a mystery. It became a symbol, a painful reminder of how even in an age of satellites, smartphones, and global surveillance, an entire plane could simply vanish. The disappearance sparked sweeping changes in the aviation industry. Airlines around the world introduced new tracking systems to ensure that a plane's position could never go completely dark again. International organizations demanded stronger safety regulations. The loss of MH370 forced the world to confront the vulnerabilities in modern aviation. And yet, despite all the technology, the core questions remain unanswered. Where exactly did the plane go down? Why did it turn off course? What happened in those final hours before it disappeared into the ocean? Search efforts have come and gone. From 2014 to 2018, billions of dollars were spent, with dozens of ships and advanced underwater drones scanning the ocean floor. The search covered nearly 120,000 square kilometers, but nothing definitive was ever found. Eventually, the official mission was suspended. For the families, the end of the search was another wound. It felt like the world was giving up, that their loved ones were being abandoned for the second time. Still, the story of MH370 refuses to fade. Independent researchers continue to analyze satellite data. Oceanographers study currents to predict where debris might surface. Documentaries, books, and investigations keep the story alive in the public eye. But the legacy of MH370 is not just technical, it is human. It is about the 239 people who vanished, the children who never came home, the parents who still keep empty chairs at dinner tables, the spouses who still look at wedding photos and wonder what might have been. The world may call it the greatest mystery in aviation history. But for the families, it is simply heartbreak. Nearly a decade later, they still wait for answers. Some hold on to hope that one day, wreckage will be found, and the truth will finally be revealed. Others have accepted that closure may never come. And so, the ocean keeps its secrets. Somewhere thousands of miles from land, deep beneath the waves, the remains of MH370 may still rest silent, hidden, and untouchable. Until that day comes, the disappearance of Flight MH370 will remain a haunting question mark. A story without an ending. A tragedy without resolution. And the world will continue to ask what really happened on that night in March 2014.